Hey guys, what up? Total Control 871. What we're looking at today is Egg Harbor Township's response to my appeal. Let's just go over it. Today is very cold, very wet. I'm not feeling very well. Seems to be the story of my life, you know. I definitely wanted to give you guys more updates on the JFS trial, you know, epilogue. It's very difficult. A lot of psychological trauma is involved and attached to that case. Picking up the paperwork and reviewing it, it's very difficult and very painful. I don't know if you understand that or not. Besides, right now I am in full-blown compartmentalization mode, where the next leg of this battle, it now rides in the hands of this judge, I believe, Honorable Donna M. Taylor. It appears to be the judge that's going to be handling this appeal. And that's where my head is at these days. This is going to be the deciding factor over whether or not I live or I die. So let's just have a look here. It starts off by saying, let's see if I can lift it up here. Dear Judge Taylor, please accept this letter in lieu of a brief in opposition to the defendant's appeal of his judgment of conviction in Egg Harbor Township Municipal Court. This matter is currently scheduled for hearing before you on November the 30th. It goes on into a statement of facts here. It says, at trial, Officer Kevin Devlin testified that on January 30th, he observed the defendant riding his bike on Black Horse Pike, where it turns off into the Tilton Road intersection with Fire Road. Officer Devlin testified that the defendant had positioned his bike in the middle of the outermost lane that are non-turning lanes. Even after passing the area with road construction, the defendant continued to stay in the middle of the lane. Defendant continued to position himself in the middle of the lane after crossing Fire Road. This is not in dispute. I utilize lane control as instructed by the state of New Jersey's law, as well as the instructional manual. Let's see. Officer Devlin was able to capture the events on his patrol car dash cam. The video played before Judge Rosenberger and entered into evidence. On June 1st, the defendant was again traveling eastbound on the Black Horse Pike. Detective Heath Purr testified that he observed, pay close attention to this part. Detective Heath Purr testified now, that he observed defendant move his bike from the shoulder into the middle of the slow eastbound travel lane. That's a very important fact. What makes it so important is that what the prosecutor is saying here, they are clearly misleading Judge Taylor in this statement. The evidence to fact to date is that I did not move my bicycle from the shoulder. The shoulder ceased to exist. This was discussed at trial, and apparently this, you see, it's not even it's the beginning of page 2, and the lies have already begun, okay? They've already begun lying. Like I say, I don't lose these things because I'm wrong. I lose because of collusion and lies, okay? You're supposed to be officers of the court. People entrust themselves to you. You're talking about attorneys that don't go through metal detectors. Why? Because they've been vetted and they are determined to be of good conscience and to be the type of person that would not pose threat. But here we see that they are every bit as capable of lying. testified that he observed the defendant move his bike from the shoulder of the middle of the lane. He began recording the defendant using a handheld recording device that would be a cell phone, that they're clearly, obviously, they don't want to say cell phone. And when you stop and think, it is Detective Purr's use of cell phone. It's one of the mitigating circumstances as to why so many of us vehicular cyclists have dusted off these old esoteric laws and are now employing them. So it could definitely be argued that Detective Purr's, his own actions are an attributing, mitigating factor. The video Detective Purr recorded was played before Judge Rosenberger and entered into evidence. Judge Rosenberger, after review of all the videotapes, found that at no time did the defendant keep as far to the right as practical. I wasn't even allowed to read the law, you know. I tried multiple times to point out the very many road hazards. Judge Rosenberger refused to hear those arguments. That's the fact. Judge Rosenberger made his finding for both January 30th and June 1st instances. He found the violations was specific to after the defendant crossed over Fire Road, as the construction under the Garden State Parkway permitted travel in the middle of the lane to proceed, in quotation marks here, to proceed safely down the highway through the difficult intersection with all of the construction. So what they're saying is that prosecution is hinging their argument for everything that happens after I cross Fire Road. Now, if this is where you're going to linchpin everything, this is where things get dicey and tricky. Because remember, the incline and the red light, you know, two things kind of bring all of traffic, well, maybe not all of traffic, but definitely a cyclist. There's a small incline there when you come out from under the Garden State Parkway overpass. The light is usually red anyway, so everybody's slowing down anyway, so it doesn't really make that big of a difference as far as the flow of traffic. But they're saying now that my conviction and everything, it all hinges for after I cross Fire Road. And for those of you, you can go back, you can see the Officer Devlin video. It clearly shows that I become the fastest vehicle on the road. It also goes on to raise the question, if traffic around me is allowed to slow down and go slower than me, and if I have all the same rights per Title 39, 414, if I have all the same rights, then how come I can't slow down? Motor traffic can slow down, but a cyclist can't slow down. But we're both supposed to have the same rights here. It goes back to what I've been saying all along. The body of traffic moves at different speeds. It's also very important to remember here, 39.414 does not say that you have to go the posted speed limit, but rather go with the flow of traffic. Which traffic? The gold SUV to my left was going significantly slower than me. I even began to pull away from Officer Devlin's patrol car, so I was going faster than him. So there's a lot. Okay. Okay, where are we at here? And I don't want to hinge too much on speed, because obviously a bicyclist cannot ride the speed of a car, okay? This we know. However, we are still entitled to the right to the road. So there are, again, going back to our constitutional vagueness, Officer Devlin says it himself in his email testimony that the law seems to cannibalize itself. It conflicts with itself. We have a right to the road. The law is saying as far to the right as practical, which means that we have to make a decision as to, you know, how far right are we going to go before we are put in harm's way. Okay, let's move on. I'm not gonna, forgive me, I don't want to rehash a whole bunch of stuff, talking points that you guys already know about. He begins recording the defendant using his phone. That was into evidence. After the review, found that no time did he keep as far right as practical. That's a lie. Judge Rosenberger made this finding for both January 30th and June 1st. He found that the violations was specific to when he crossed Fire Road, see traffic. We're moving on to the part here where it says standard of review. In a de novo review on the record of a municipal deposition, the law division judge is tasked with let me start this again. In a de novo review on the record of a municipal court disposition, the law division judge is tasked not with affirming or reversing the lower court's ruling, but rather with making independent findings of fact based on the review of the record to determine whether sufficient evidence was presented to support a conviction. State v. Here. Pause and read that at your leisure. Let's see here. Let's see. Factual findings, unless they were so clearly. This is an interesting point right here. So let me just shit. That last paragraph ended off by saying, although not bound by the municipal court's findings, the reviewing court owes due deference to the municipal court's credibility. That's interesting they say credibility because, you know, like I said, not even 2 pages in and you were already caught lying, and you're asking that your credibility be taken into account. Municipal court's credibility assessment and should not disturb that court's factual findings unless they were so clearly erroneous as to produce an unjust result. You mean erroneous such as forbid the defendant from reading case law, such as questioning my witnesses based on case law, okay, the denial of due process, okay? I'm supposed to be allowed to do certain things, okay? It's bad enough that I'm not given an attorney, but when I am forced to be my own attorney, you won't even allow me the due process thereof. If the reviewing court finds the defendant guilty, it shall not affirm the sentence. Basically, they're saying keep the punishment in place. Don't make it any greater. They again here on our next page they go into Title 39, 414, da-da-da-da. Now, clearly here, to avoid debris, drain, and other hazardous conditions, entered into evidence was indeed just such facts. The damaged drain, the debris that the stormwater sweeps into these drains, you know, and they were not, they go on in this thing to say that there's an occasional drain. No, there's not an occasional drain. And it was spoken about as well. The drains were spoken about. I was not allowed to question further with the drains issue, because they go on to say in this thing that, you know, the defendant didn't bring up drains. Yes, I did. I did bring these things up. Again, you're lying. Your credibility is shit. Let's see. The record reflects unrefuted testimony from both Officer Devlin and Detective Purr, stating that the defendant was operating his bicycle in the middle of the outermost lane on both January 3rd and June 1st. It's true, I utilize lane control. None of that's in question here. Rather than contest this point, the defendant testified on cross-examination that he was operating his bicycle in the middle of the lane per New Jersey's instructions. Well, that's partially correct. It is part of it is because of New Jersey. They're talking about the cycling manual. I do indeed invoke the cycling manual, but I also invoke Title 39-414. Again, we're going back to our word practical. Practicable. Okay? Learned decision. Okay? They're not cyclists. They're not on the road. They don't know about the hazardous conditions that I attempted numerous times to bring up, but they would not allow. Furthermore, apart from construction and the occasional, they say occasional storm drain, yeah, a lot more than occasional, there were no road hazards that would necessitate the defendant riding in the middle of the lane. I've got 2 hit and runs that would seem to speak to the contrary. The defendant testified during his direct examination that he was practicing lane control as described in New Jersey Bicycle Manual, published by Federal Administration. He testified that he does not keep himself. He testified that he does this to keep himself safe from extremely bad, in quotation mark, drivers. He did not indicate during his testimony that he was riding in the middle of the lane on either day to avoid drains, debris. You mean that testimony that I was strictly forbidden from speaking? That testimony? Okay. Therefore, the defendant does not. The defendant's conduct does not fall within any of the enumerated situations under 39-414, where a bicyclist is permitted to move to the left of the roadway. New Jersey Bicycle Manual does not carry the full weight and authority of the law. It appears to be a general guide on riding bicycles on the road. What the Bicycle Manual does, it gives clarification to the word practicable. That's what it does. It was created by multiple agencies, including the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, which is outside the purview of the state of New Jersey. It is not intended to be an authority on application of New Jersey laws, nor is it intended to persuade New Jersey laws. Therefore, on page 15 of the manual, preceding the mention of taking the lane, it states that between intersections, keep as far right as practical. I've never argued that the cycling manual does not instruct its cyclists to stay as far to the right as practical. Again, this is only under certain hazardous conditions that the manual instructs cyclists to take the lane, narrow lane width, excessively narrow lane widths. They're writing this as if I am saying, I am intimating, I am waving the manual around saying I can go into the middle of the lane for as far, for as long as I want. And that's not what I'm saying at all. They go on here to, let's see. The phrasing of the statement echoes the requirements. Again, on page 11, the manual, there is paragraph entitled Ride Right. Again, I'm not arguing that the manual doesn't tell cyclists to ride far right. Here you can okay, see if I can wrap this up. Last page. Defendant's argument seems to be a matter of principle. Wrong. Law. It is apparent from the defendant's testimony closing argument that he believes that the law, as written, does not achieve legislative intent of improving the safety of a cyclist. as well intentioned as defendant's argument may ostensibly be, it is an argument that should be directed to a state legislator. I will agree that we need better legislation, but I do currently have the law on my side. And I think you know that too, Mr. Alferman. Why else would you forbid me from reading the law in court? I'm just saying. Conclusion. The evidence on the record shows that January 30th and June 1st, the defendant willfully violated the keeping to the right of 39-414. Furthermore, there is no evidence on the record to support any of the exceptions to keeping to right requirement found in subsections of A through the moving left to get around things and storm drains and hazardous conditions. The defendant's argument that the New Jersey Bicycle Manual permits center lane riding is not cognizable. Is not a cognizable defense under the statute or the laws of this state. Yeah. Alright guys, so this is what I'm dealing with. It is the battle of my life. I'm gonna end with this story from my childhood. I remember as a child, I was on a playground. Schoolyard or playground bully approaches me, starts to bully. There was a neighbor who knew me. Her house was right there next to the playground. And as I think about it to this day, I never even knew this woman's name. I always referred to her as Mrs. Willie because her husband's name was Willie. I don't even know the last name, I really don't. And I always called her Mrs. Willie. Kind of a holdover from the old days where women would introduce themselves using their husband's complete name, Like if I had a wife, it would be Mrs. Charles Dunbar, Anyway. So, I see the safety of her porch is just, 50 yards away. And as this bully goes to beat me up, I bolt as fast as my little legs could take me, racing as far as I can, screaming at the top of my lungs, Mrs. Willie, hoping that she would open up the door by the time I got there. Well, I did indeed achieve safe harbor. I escaped my playground bully. Fast forward a few weeks, when I was at one of the local corner stores there in the neighborhood, there he was, the bully. And that bully was ready to finish up what he started. So there I was, fighting. When the fight was over, I didn't win any as a child. I'm not a violent person. I came away with a very hard-learned lesson. Never run from your bullies. Stand and fight, even if you go down swinging. Never run. I will not run to another state. I will stand, I will fight, and if need be, I will die. Total Control, 871.